Hi everyone, Gustaw here. Recently, I've got a question how we can create these vertical lines in a matrix table to visually separate given metrics in a matrix table. So let me show you a few examples and then we quickly build this solution together. So this is the first example when we have like the gross profit and gross margin. We have the separation between the previous year numbers, the actuals, and the deltas. Of course, it's just an example how we can create these vertical lines in terms of the structure, but there are like plenty different use cases. Different example can be like here when we have the previous year values with the total percentage, the structure, the distribution, we have the actuals and we have the deltas here. Once again, the vertical lines which separates given section in the table. And one additional example is here when we have, in this case, we are walking through a different kind of the visual calculations and we have a basic calculations here on the left side, then the divider, which is like in a like bold, darker color style. And then we also have additional vertical lines here, a little bit more grayish to separate given section. But these are just an examples. So let me quickly show you how we can build this. So let's go to the Power BI. We have two matrix tables. As you can see here, there is a breakdown by country and here also by country in the rows. And we have several different metrics in our column headers here. So let's assume that we would like to add some kind of the vertical separators, like dividers, lines in a specific places. So just to base this as a sample example, let's assume that you would like to add this divider, let's say after the delta share, because these metrics are more related with the structure, the percentage structure in the total. And then we have the deltas, meaning like the year-over-year growth, in that case, comparing to the previous year, and we have the relative percentage. So let's assume that you would like to add this vertical line here and here, only just an example. So basically what we would need is a few placeholders. In my case, I have like the 4 placeholders, but to get this result, we only need like two placeholders. It can be named like placeholder, it can be named as blanks, whatever suits your needs. Nevertheless, each of these measures reference just a blank. So it retrieves a blank, but it's important to just get this result to have at least two separate placeholder measures. So if we assume that you would like to add this placeholder, these dividers after the share, let's start with the vertical lines. Actually, as I see here, we already have one placeholder added here just as a space. So we can see that, for example, this particular space is created using the placeholder v1. So let's add the placeholder v2 and it will serve us as a divider, where we can apply the grayish color as a background. So let's add this here, for example, after the share as discussed before. So this placeholder v2 is the measure we are now bring to our fields. So let's rename it, and I will press I will add here the name in the form of the two spaces, like 2 characters, 2 spaces. 2 spaces because the placeholder v1, let's assume is gonna be only a single space, but the secondary placeholder has to be named a bit differently in order to have this control in a specific column section in the matrix table. So let's assume we are calling that as a double space. So now let's go here to the formatting options to the specific column. Let's pick our v2 placeholder is that one, because this one actually creates a space. That one will be creating the for each divider. So let's pick this one. And let's apply some kind of the color. I will just pick some grayish, a light grayish color for that one. What we in many cases would like to apply as well is to turn on more options, as we can see here. So let's say you would like to apply this to also to the header and to the total. It's not always the case. It's the case of the being a little bit flexible in terms of how you would like to structure and design it. Nevertheless, in many cases, we would like to have all of these options turned on. And then if we decrease the width of this column, as you can see here, it creates this vertical line. One additional thing which is important, let's quickly check how it works with the wrapping of the values, because it might be like a little bit of the drawback here. So let's quickly check how that works. So we go to the column headers and let's assume we actually have the text wrap turned on, because sometimes it actually needed. So as you can see here, as we have like the two space here and we minimize the width of this column, it's automatically wrapped. So it might be a case that in some cases it won't be like the perfect in your use case to have this text wrap. Sometimes you just need having the text wrap turned on because you have like the lengthy names of the columns and you would like to have like the double headers and so on. Nevertheless, we just have to be conscious about whether using like this option turn off or turn on. In that case, I don't need it to have this text wrap turn on, so I switch that off, and it works a little bit better in case of these dividers. Nevertheless, we have to be flexible. So in that case, we have this one single line. And what I usually like to do is also have these additional spaces on the left and on the right side of the dividers. So starting working on this solution, as you already noticed, we have this one additional placeholder, V1. So let's also add the secondary on the right side. And one important thing is that if we are using the V1 placeholder on the left and on the right side to the placeholder V2, which is our vertical line, it's worth noting that the width of these two spaces, spatial columns, will have the same width. So if we increase the width for that V1 placeholder, this column, that one automatically will be extended as well. So the width of these columns will be just the same. So if we decrease a little bit, it will be decreased that one. Nevertheless, I just personally prefer to have this additional placeholder on the left, on the right side, to have these separators a little bit more visible. So let's quickly add the same V2 placeholder after, let's say, after the delta, the absolute delta before the relative variance. Of course, it's just an example. It doesn't mean that we always have to have these vertical lines before and after different deltas. So let's use the V2 as before, and you can see that after bringing this, we automatically get this grayish line. So let's bring it here. And as you can see, it's very close to the delta for the data bars of the nominal variance. So let's also add the V1 placeholder here. So now it's a little bit more space between the data bars and this divider. And we can potentially also add this space on the right side here. It's optional, of course. So it's recommended to just test and play a little bit with that in your use case. But basically, it's the logic behind adding these vertical lines in a strategic ways to distinct, to separate given sections in your matrix table. We could do the same here. For instance, we could do the separator after the PY and actuals, before the deltas, and then we can also separate the deltas from the percentage share metric type. So it would be like the additional use case. Nevertheless, you can of course adjust it depending on your needs. The logic stays the same. So for today, it's everything I wanted to share. Hope it's gonna be helpful in some use case, and see you again next time. Take care. Bye.